Thank you everybody for joining us. I'm Asir. I'm on point for everything developers need to build, migrate, and scale Java applications on Azure. With me today is Rory. Rory?
Thanks, Asir. And yeah, I'm an advocate for Java, working with Asir on Java and Azure. So excited to be here.
Are you all ready? Ready to take Spring Boot apps to production without worrying about infrastructure or Kubernetes?
Yeah, no, I really struggle with Kubernetes rollouts. I have to learn a lot of things, pod scheduler, YAML, how to operate them all. I really want to use Kubernetes without having to manage it. Can you show me how this is possible?
Sure. Let's start with Spring. Spring is so popular. Look at the number, 52%. That's a sizable number, right? Spring Boot just Spring Boot alone, it enjoys millions and millions of downloads per month, and it's growing pretty rapidly, right? Now, when we bring that to Azure, right, we started working with Pivotal in 2016, the Spring engineering team in Pivotal. It's about 5.5 years ago. Lots of integration work here, Rory, lots and lots, just to make Spring easier to run on Azure.
That's quite long, and there's been so many innovative integrations. I really would like to know more about them.
So these integrations, Rory, they make it easy to connect and interact with data, messaging, cache, storage, directories, and so on. If you just take the data alone, look at all the possible databases. So if you're using Spring Data JPA, JDBC, you can connect with any of those databases. You can also use Spring Data MongoDB and connect with Cosmos DB. You can use Spring Security to secure your application, like enterprise-grade authentication using Active Directory. You can pump in all your logs and metrics to Azure Monitor. You can see the list. So many integrations to make it easy to run your Spring Boot apps.
Now, I know the difference of Spring Boot and all of its integrations now, but tell me a little bit about what's the difference between Spring Boot and Spring Cloud?
So Java developers, right, they can use Spring Boot to build anything, get it up and running as quickly as possible. They can also use Spring Cloud to coordinate anything between these microservices. Now, if you look at this layout, Rory, it's a typical layout for deploying Spring-based microservices. If you look at the center, right? Center represents the apps that are interacting with data, messaging, cache, directories, all of them on the right. They could be running in the cloud or they could be running on-prem as well. If you look at the left-hand side, this is where the business consumers are on the left, and they're interacting with the center where your business apps are running. Now, around your business apps, this is where the Spring Cloud middleware components are laid. So that gives you an idea of the layout, Rory.
Yeah, it still looks like there's a lot of challenges that I have to manage, though. Can you help me understand a little bit more?
Sure, right. So there are some impediments. Now, regardless of where you're deploying, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, whether you're deploying in a virtual machine or a container, or any cloud, right? Whether it's Google, Amazon, or Microsoft, developers are on point for building a dynamically scaling infrastructure to deploy all of these. That can be a high effort. Many of our developers are trying to build these on virtual machines and containers. Now, once they build it, like on that infrastructure, then they have to think about an app life cycle on top of that infrastructure. When we say app life cycle, what we're talking about is like you create an app, you deploy, you update, you get log stream, patch, stop, start. There's a lot there, about 24. And you have to have that so that you can have an experience of building and continuously deploying, right? Then the next step there is once you have the apps up and running, you want to troubleshoot and you want to keep an eye on production. For that, you have to wire them all up for monitoring as well. Now, Rory, everybody must figure out how to solve these things. And yet, all of those don't directly deliver business value. It is the centerpiece, right? So if you're running a reservation company, then the number of customers trying to use it, how long they spend, the number of reservations made, or if it is an order, number of orders made, how many errors, that is where you measure the business part of it, right? Now, this is where, technology companies like Microsoft, we started asking the question, how can we remove these impediments and friction for our developers? So we started to ask the question, what if we could remove these for developers and even more developers in collaboration with Pivotal? We talked with Pivotal and they were pretty excited. And that is how this Azure Spring Cloud got started. And that is how the product came together. And you can see the Microsoft logo and the Pivotal logo coming together as Azure Spring Cloud.
That's pretty fascinating, and it's a great background. But can I use this now, though? Is it part of Azure, and is it nicely integrated with Azure?
Yes, today, yes, definitely. Azure Spring Cloud is a fully managed service for Spring Boot apps that lets developers focus on building those apps that run their business without the hassle of worrying about the underlying infrastructure, right? All they have to do, developers, is simply deploy their jars or code, and Azure Spring Cloud will wire them all up for them, right? And once you deploy, it's up and running. You can easily monitor the app, monitor the application performance, fix errors, and rapidly improve those applications, right? It's well integrated into the Azure ecosystem, and it's ready for all the enterprise and big companies, small companies. Anybody can use it today.
Asir, I've got a lot of Spring Boot apps right now in production, and they're all stuck on-premise servers. Do I have to rewrite all of them now?
No, not at all. Zero code changes. That's the very important thing. As you move to the cloud, the configuration coordinates are changing. So you probably want to change them so that your apps can interact with the data, cache, messaging, and directory, and so on. The service by itself is jointly conceived, developed, operated, and supported by Microsoft and VMware. Now, for application performance monitoring, it supports out of the box and tracing, not only using Azure Monitor and Application Insight, but also popular established performance monitoring tools such as New Relic, App Dynamics, and Dynatrace. It's a fully managed service for you.
It sounds really exciting. I'm starting to understand how I get the power of Kubernetes, but I don't really have to worry about managing it. Can you give me a little bit more detail about that?
Sure, a little more details here, right? So if you look at the big rectangle there, that represents Azure Spring Cloud. It is built on Kubernetes. Your apps are running in one of the two dedicated Kubernetes clusters per instance of the service. And those apps, they can talk to any Azure service or any backend systems that are running in your on-prem or in virtual machines somewhere, right? And the apps, you can secure those apps by using Azure Active Directory for your logs, metrics, and alerts. You can get them through the Azure Monitor. Now you can automate all of this, Rory, by using the tools that you love. I know you like Terraform, GitHub, anything, like any tools, Jenkins, anything that you have, you can automate them. Net, this whole thing is an easy way to get started so that you can focus on your business objective and everything else is taken care for you in the cloud itself.
This sounds really, really, really nice and really exciting. But I'm still a little bit confused. It looks like I have to manage still some services. What exactly do I have to manage then?
You don't have to manage anything. You don't have to do it all because Azure Spring Cloud absorbs that complexity that you saw in the big rectangle, right?
That is really nice.
Yeah, all the complexities around infrastructure, hosting the microservices, app lifecycle, managing those microservices, blue-green deployments, pushing logs and metrics, and the list just goes on and on. Now, everything, Rory, for you, everything is supported by Microsoft and VMware.
Asir, I have to see a demo. I hope you've got something prepared, though. Can we see something?
Sure, it's demo time for you. Yeah, demo time. Let's take a look at it. Rory, I'm going to get started with this Spring Pet Clinic microservices application. That's pretty popular. You can see the numbers, GitHub numbers. They are very popular. And this particular repo has several applications and they come together as one line of business application. Imagine that you are running a pet clinic and you have operators, you have doctors, you have vet doctors and your customers have their pet owners, right? They have pets. So you can see those apps, they are all right here, right? If you were to look at, like, these are modules, each module represents an app and they come together, right? So if I were to look at the architecture, this is a good diagram that explains where the pet clinic operator comes through here, comes through the gateway, and they're managing their customers here. And the pets are right here, and the doctors are here. And suddenly the customers bring their pets to the doctor, so the visits are tracked here. And there are data underneath it. Now, all of these, we're going to take it into Azure Spring Cloud and MySQL database. So what we have here is an app composed of microservices, and I want to run them. And I'm not interested in any Kubernetes or infrastructure work. How can we do that, right? So this is where I took the liberty of creating an Azure Spring Cloud instance here. You can see that it's in the portal. This is where I deployed all of those apps. So here are the apps. And when I go into these apps, you would see that all five of them are, six of them are running. Right? One of them is an admin server. So there are about five totally here. Now, it is up and running in the cloud at scale. So let's try and open this. Okay. I am going to open this here in a different window. And there you go. The app is here. It's up and running. So the operator was coming in. I can look at the customers, pet clinic customers. So these are all my customers. And you can see Eduardo here. Eduardo has a couple of pets. One is called Joel and the other one is Rosie. There he has two dogs. I can also look at my pets, my doctors. These are all my doctors. Now, if I go into the owners and I can register a new owner as well, I can also go to an existing owner and start scheduling some visits. So if I were to take Davis here has a lizard. I can start scheduling a visit right here. Right? So you see how the app is up and running right here, and it's up and running, and it's running at scale, Rory, just for you here.
I did see the 5 services, but how do you actually wire all of those up?
So here you see, Rory, I didn't have to do anything at all. When I deployed my apps to the Azure Spring Cloud, the service makes them discoverable using a managed Spring Cloud registry. And you can see the discovery registry right here on this panel, right?
Okay, but so if I want to change the app configurations without redeploying all those microservices, how can I actually do that?
So this is where there is a config server here, right? It's a managed Spring Cloud config server instance. You can see if I open that up, there is a Git repo bound to it, right? So the config server can take multiple repos. One of your deployments can take a repo that points to your UAT. Another one can point to your production. Another one can point to your dev test cluster. That way you can have many repos, right? The other thing you can do is you can also make a change and do a Git push, and then it'll get updated automatically for you, Rory.
Okay, so I see that I've got 2 or more components to worry about now. A config server and a discovery server?
Not at all, not at all. The Azure Spring Cloud, the Spring Cloud Service Registry and the Spring Cloud Config Server, they both are fully managed. You don't have to worry about it at all. All you have to do is just deploy the jars, and all of those wiring will automatically take place for you, Rory.
Whoa. I am kind of concerned also about, having enough instances for my microservices. Like, that customer service that you had there, how do I actually go and create enough instances for it?
Okay, let's take a look. So this is the customer service. We have about 6 instances. Maybe we can just scale out a bit. So let me click on that, and there is a scale out menu here. When I go here, I select the customer service. And you would see that currently I have 6 instances up and running. I can just increase as many as I want. I can go up to, let's say, 247. As soon as I set it, it will automatically scale out to 247 instances for you, Rory.
Yeah, I don't really want to manually scale them though. Is there anything else that I can use?
Sure, we have the auto scale here, right? So this is the auto scale. When it comes to auto scale, you can auto scale based on a load. Let's say the app usage, like the CPU usage or the app memory usage, and you can scale out and you can scale in. And the other one is you can use schedule to, for example, on Saturday, you can scale in, Monday, you can scale out. So let me show you one where it's based on CPU usage. I click on this one where it's going to show you the CPU usage right now. The way I can configure here is I can say when it reaches 50% of CPU usage for a certain period of time, scale it out. Similarly, when it goes down, I can configure to scale it in for you, Rory.
I like that these things are really managed for me. But what happens if there's a problem with my app? How do I even see what's going on?
So you can view all the logs for all the apps and the metrics as well. So this is where in Azure, we have the fundamentals called diagnostic services, right? So diagnostic settings. So you go into diagnostic settings and you can configure where you want to take your logs and metrics. In this case, let me show you what we have done here. We have configured it to send all the logs and metrics into Azure Log Analytics. So then I can go into the Log Analytics and run some queries, right? In this case, I'm writing a query using Custo language. Custo is similar to SQL. I'm writing a query where I'm saying, bring me all the logs for all my apps. So you can see all my logs are right here. And then I can pick one and see what it says. It says it was able to correctly connect to the Eureka endpoint. Right? So I'll get all my logs here. Now I can also change because all the data is in Custo, I can come up with different queries. Let's say I have a query right here where I say, hey, bring me all the errors and exceptions that happened to my service in the last, say, 24 hours. And you can see it draws a pie chart based on that. Now, where do these errors come from? There is a 6th app, and I didn't deploy it. So all the 5 apps are trying to look for the 6th app. And you can see all these errors are being thrown. So intentionally, you can see that. Now, your apps are also connecting to config server, right? So you can write a different query. So I wrote a different query here where I'm saying, get me all the logs associated with the connection between my apps and the config server. So here it brings out all my logs here. And you can see that a few minutes ago, there was another connection here from the app to the config. So an app restarted. So when it restarted, it started talking to the config server to get the config data. So that way, you can also get this on the developer machine, Rory, where you can just say AZ Spring Cloud app logs, and it'll start tailing directly to your dev machine as well, Rory.
That's pretty fascinating. And what happens if something breaks? We're developers and everything seems to break all the time, though. I want to get alerted before things break.
Certainly, right? That's where the metrics are for you, right? So if you look at this, these are business metrics that are automatically collected and visualized as business metrics. For in this example, as a pet clinic operator, what happens is you have pet clinic owners sitting in the waiting area, and number of pets they bring, and the number of visits that are happening. So based on this, you can learn. Say, for example, there's a spike here, right? So if you want to be alerted for that particular spike, when this is auto collected and you can set up the alert. So you would go into a new alert here, and then it will start defining the criteria. Of course, you can modify the way you want it. And then you can set up an action group. The action group they could be texting it for you. They could be sending an email or creating a ticket on the system. That way, Rory, you can proactively take action here.
So that's great and everything, but I use my microservices and I really scale out my components individually. And I want to know how each microservice responds and is performant, and which ones are slow, so that I can do some tuning to modify their performance. How do I know which app instance is bombed because of some production data that came in?
So this is where we have distributor tracing, right? So here, if I go into distributor tracing, it will give you an incredible view, some meaningful insights, and some actionable logs and metrics, right? So let me try to show you here. This is a complete map of the system. And you can see that the operator calls are coming into the API gateway. From the gateway, it's going into customer service. It's going into visit service, and it's also going into the vet service as well. Now, behind all these, there's also a database. So you can now visualize the interconnections that are happening across these systems, right? So as the calls are coming in, you can start tracing them, right? So this gives you some amount of meaningful insights right there. So if I were to click here, right, one of these segments right here, what happens is it'll give me some meaningful insights. It says that these calls are slow, so I can investigate the performance. So if I were to click the performance here, it gives me all the calls that are happening along that way. So it draws this beautiful chart. Now I can choose this and start drilling it. So if I were to go and drill, it'll bring me a few instances to take a look for me, right? So this way it reduces the time taken by developers to identify what the problems are. So if I go in, it'll give me a complete view of the end-to-end transactions, right? So you can see how the calls went from one step to another step, and seems like this call is taking a long time. So let me click on that. When I click on that, I can see the exact query that happened here, right? This way, the developers have a good amount of insight into what happened and where the delay is happening, right? So that will help you, Rory, in this case.
Okay, so I saw in the first screen that you had 5 million calls in the last 4 hours. Asir, what's going on there?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, they are in production at cloud scale, running around 32 million calls a day. And remember, we were talking about the manual scale and order scale. Just a few dial change, I can quickly raise this up to a billion calls a day, right? So that is how it is running right now.
That is very impressive. I didn't expect that in the demo.
You can also go deeper, Rory. We can go deeper into performance of all the operations here, right? You can see all the operations are here, and it shows you the numbers, right? And you can select some of them, and you can drill just like the way I showed you to drill the calls going all the way down to the SQL. You can also look at, for each of these operations, there are about 10 million calls coming in the last 4 hours, because for the inbound calls, there are subsequent calls that are happening behind the scene as well. So for each of these, there are SQL calls going out too. So you can look at those dependencies, app dependencies. So in this picture, you can see all the SQL calls are listed right here for you, right? So in the last 4 hours, there were about 37 million calls, and it shows you the breakdown of which query and how long it took, right? And you can drill down just like the way I showed you the drill down and get the end-to-end transactions for this. You can also look at the failures associated with this. Remember, we didn't deploy many of those applications. And because of that, there are so many exceptions happening here. Like in the last 4 hours, there were about 1.7K million exceptions happened here. So perhaps we should take a look at, when I click on this, it'll give me this. And if I click here, as a developer, you want to see exactly where the exception is happening. So you can see in this diagram. And if you click on it, the exception will show up here. Now it'll be right on your face. This way, you can easily get to find out what the problems are, right? Now, in addition to getting the performance dependencies and the failures, you can also see the live metrics coming through, which is really less than a second, right? So the load is on the system and you can see the metrics, and you can also see the various machines that are operating underneath it, its capacity, number of requests coming in. So you have a view of what is happening there. The other important aspect is when you have these apps up and running, the availability of those endpoints is pretty important. So this is where we have availability as well. So when I go to availability, I can set it up to make sure that the clients are coming in and requesting from all over the United States. So there are East US, North Central, and shows you it was available in the last 24 hours. All the endpoints were available for you, Rory.
Asir, this is really astounding. What code did you have to write to get all of this monitoring up?
Nothing at all. I simply deployed my jar files and everything got automatically wired up and effortlessly, right? That all the data started flowing in, and then you see all these visuals just for you, Ravi.
Can I do the same if I didn't have to write any code? I really like New Relic. Can I do the same and use New Relic as my application monitoring tool?
Oh, is New Relic your favorite, Rory?
Yeah, I know it is.
Oh, cool. Let's go to New Relic. Yeah. So here, New Relic is connected to the same deployment where you can see all the apps here. Let's click on a couple, right? So you have the API gateway. So let's look at API gateway. So if I open API gateway, and if you're familiar with New Relic has also rich features here. So here you're looking at the transactions coming in the last 60 minutes, right? You can see the throughput that's happening. There was a little bit error here. There's plenty of insights here. If you look at all these, there's plenty of insights. Let's also look at another one, which is the customer service, right? So if you look at the customer service, you can see all the calls that are coming in, right? All the calls coming in. So in the last 3 hours, there were so many calls, and you can have so many of these. And there are so many features that you can go down and check it out, Rory.
Okay, so I have an iPhone, and can I know this is a big stretch, but can I do all of this via my mobile phone?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Here you can see the iPhone screen, Rory, where all the apps are seen. It's the same thing. It's a mobile phone view. Now I can go into customer service. I'm going to click on customer service right here. And you can see all the data about your memory usage, your heap usage, and you can also come out and look at all the transactions here. So it picked up all the transactions, and you can see one of the call is taking a lot of time. So perhaps we should look at the traces there. So I'll go look at the traces, and I'll pick one of them, and it gives me a view of all the calls, the entire call stack trace of that particular request, right? So there's a database connection, and you can see that the select statement took 4.73 milliseconds. So it gives you a view so that, let's say you're outside somewhere and there's something went wrong, you can quickly pick it up and see what went wrong here. Right?
So yeah, this is really great, and it looks like you worked hard to code all of this though, and deploying it. But what my takeaway from here is that I don't have to manage Kubernetes anymore. I can just sit back and monitor my app though. I've got one more question. When I deploy my Spring Boot apps, I always end up with setting some credential as part of my deployments, or my credentials are set okay, but they're visible to everyone. How do I protect these from getting into the wild and becoming dangerous?
So Rory, on the left, you can see all the parameters for the customer service configuration. You can see the database connection string and some license keys, things like that are going on. Now, if you click on that button that says reveal all, everything will be visible to your operators, your developers, right? So that raises a significant risk for you. So this is where we have integration with Key Vault, where you can use the Key Vault to store and manage all your secrets, and they can be very safe, right? Once you have those secrets there, you can grant the app and others with role-based access, right? And it's not only that, you can also track who's actually reading those values. Once you set that up, you can see on the right where the app does not have any of those values, and the app will automatically load those secrets at startup time for you, Rory.
I've learned a lot today, Asir. I just want to summarize what I've learned. I saw you deploying a jar file, and you didn't have to manage any of the infrastructure. Everything was managed for you. I can focus now on creating rich Spring Boot applications and not worry about their life cycle. Monitoring is a breeze and so easy, and I get to use my new iPhone.
That's right, Rory. There are plenty more rich features in Azure Spring Cloud to make you even more productive.
I think my favorite is that I don't have to manage Kubernetes anymore. So I really see now how I can get my Spring Boot apps to integrate with Azure data, cache, messaging, and directory services using rich, idiomatic Spring integrations. Thank you all for joining us today. Everyone can build cloud-native solutions today and advance them into production. If you want to get started, Quick Start is a good start. You can also use the self-paced workshop. Don't want to use the workshop? Well, let's use Asir's great app that he showed us today. All the code is available on the GitHub repo. If you even prefer videos, I've got some great YouTube videos. Let us know how you're building beautiful, impactful solutions. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you again.